Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajaka Acharya Stotra Sapta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Gauta Vaishnavindra Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya's Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Gauta Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Nama Om Vishnu Paraya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutala Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Sunnivari Paschachare Satane. Hare Krishna. So this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter number 6. Prahlad instructs his demoniac schoolmates. Text number 24. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll read the word meanings and then we can chant together. Tasmat, therefore, sarveshu, to all, bhuteshu, living entities, dayam, mercy, kuruta, show, sohridam, friendliness, bhavam, attitude, asuram, of the demons who separate friends and enemies, unmuchya, giving up, yaya, by which Tushyati is satisfied at Hokshaja, the Supreme Lord who is beyond the perception of the senses. Tasmat sarveshu bhuteshu dayam kuruta sohridam bhavam asuram unmuchya Yaya tushyat yadhokshaja Tasmat sarveshu bhuteshu Dayam kuruta sohridam Bhavam asuram unmucha yaya tushyat yadhokshaja tasmat sarveshu bhuteshu dhayam kuruta sohridam bhavam asuram unmucha yaya tushyat yadhokshaja
Tasmat sarveshu bhuteshu Dhyayam kuruta sauridam Bhavam asuram anmuchay Yaya tasya adoksaja Tastat sarveshu bhuteshu Dhyayam kuruta sauridam Bhavam asuram unmucya Yaya tashyati adokshadaha
Tasmat sarveshu bhuteshu Dayam kurta sauhridam Bhavam asuram unmucya Yaya tushyate adhokshaja
Anyone else? Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, my dear young friends born of demons, please act in such a way that the Supreme Lord, who is beyond the conception of material knowledge, will be satisfied. Give up your demoniac nature and act without enmity or duality. Show mercy to all living entities by enlightening them in devotional service, thus becoming their well-wishers. Purport. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 18:55, Bhaktya mam abhijananti yavan yas chasmi tatvataha. One can understand the Supreme Personality as He is only by devotional service. Prahlad Maharaj ultimately instructed his class friends, the sons of demons, to accept the process of devotional service by preaching the science of Krishna consciousness to everyone. Preaching is the best service to the Lord. The Lord will immediately be extremely satisfied with one who engages in this service of preaching Krishna consciousness. This is confirmed by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita 18:69, Nacha tasman manusheshu kaschin me priyakritama. There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. If one sincerely tries his best to spread Krishna consciousness by preaching the glories of the Lord and His supremacy, even if he is imperfectly educated, he becomes the dearmost servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is bhakti. One who performs this service for humanity without discrimination between friends and enemies. As one performs this service for humanity without discrimination between friends and enemies, the Lord becomes satisfied and the mission of one's life is fulfilled. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore advised everyone to become a guru, devotee, and preach Krishna consciousness. Yare daka tare kaha Krishna upadesh. This is the easiest way to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By such preaching, the preacher becomes satisfied, and those to whom he preaches are also satisfied. This is a process of bringing peace and tranquility to the entire world. Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gatva mam santam richati. One is expected to understand these three formulas of knowledge concerning the Supreme Lord: that He is the supreme enjoyer, that He is the proprietor of everything, and that He is the best well-wisher and friend of everyone. A preacher should personally understand these truths and preach them to everyone. Then there will be peace and tranquility all over the world. The word sohradam, friendliness, is very significant in this verse. People are generally ignorant of Krishna consciousness, and therefore, to become their best well-wisher, one should teach them about Krishna consciousness without discrimination. Since the Supreme Lord Vishnu is situated in the core of everyone's heart, every body is a temple of Vishnu. One should not misuse this understanding as an excuse for such words as Daridra Narayana. If Narayana lives in the house of a Daridra, a poor man, this does not mean that Narayan becomes poor. He lives everywhere, in houses of the poor, those of the rich, and those of the rich, but in all circumstances he remains Narayana. To think he becomes either poor or rich is a material calculation. He is always Sat Aishvarya Purnam, full in six opulences in all circumstances. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. This purport has some quite amazing statements in it. And it's all about the benefit we get, actually the exalted opportunity that we have to become teachers of spirituality, teachers of Krishna consciousness, to become preachers in this world. It's the way to please Krishna. And it's the way to perfect our lives. So this morning I want to talk a little bit about some of my realizations based on Prabhupada's teachings about this activity of preaching Krishna consciousness. And I want to start at one of the Harinams that we have in the temple where I live, Alachua, Florida. We do a lot of Harinams at the beaches because Florida has so many beaches. Actually, we do about 6 or 7 Rath Yatras on different beach towns in Florida. We have one coming up actually in the oldest U.S. city, St. Augustine, Florida, supposed to be the oldest city in the United States, first settlement. So we do Rath Yatra there. I think it's the 12th April, something. It's always very nice. The people there like us. We go there for their Christmas parade also, and we have a Rath Yatra cart in their Christmas parade. And we always win like the best float for the parade. They like the devotees there coming and chanting Hare Krishna. So last year I was on the Harinam Sankirtan at Jacksonville Beach, and in the course of going up and down the beach spreading the holy name, we often stop at different places and naturally crowds gather around. So we stopped at a place and a crowd gathered around, and one young man, you can imagine a young man going to the beach wanting to enjoy the time of full life of his senses, but he was attracted by the Harinam party, and he came up and he asked me, "What's this all about?" And I think I made some mistake. I repeated the truth as I've learned it, but I think it was not the best preaching strategy. And that's the point here. So he said, what's this all about? And I said, it's about God. And I could see him like back off. Yes, this is about God, no doubt. But was that the best thing to say to him? It's about God. Probably not. He kind of like backed up and gradually went away from the crowd and just went on with his business. What could I have said to him that might have evoked a different response? Obviously he was attracted, but I could have said something else, emphasized something else that might have attracted him more. What do you think might have attracted him more? What kind of things would you say? Harivilas, what would you say? The original joy that's natural for everything. And wouldn't that be more appropriate to what we're talking about? A young man at the beach, full life of his senses. Then it's about God. That's controlling, restricting. We have to think about these things. We have to become. We're given the opportunity to take this exalted position of preaching Krishna consciousness to others, to being spiritual teachers in the world. Prabhupada says, guru devotees. Don't we have to take it a little bit serious so that we just make the best use of every opportunity we get? I regret that to this day. Again, although it's the truth, Krishna's name, it is about God. But he couldn't perceive it. We have to be intelligent how to give Krishna consciousness. Now, another instance happened at the same Rath Yatra a little while later that day. When I go on these things, because the sun's hot on the beach, I wear like a baseball cap, but it has a big Om symbol on it. It's a black cap with a Om, big Om in gold. So anyone that knows that symbol can immediately see it from a distance. So I was walking on the beach, and one young girl, she came and tapped me on the shoulder. She came and tapped me on the shoulder, and she pointed to her ankle. And on her ankle, she had like a Om tattoo. She wasn't, someone that I would have thought that would be interested in Krishna consciousness. But she had an Om tattoo on her ankle. And so she immediately made a connection. Oh, you got an Om, I got an Om. So there was some opportunity and opening to preach Krishna consciousness there. To tell her what it meant. Maybe she didn't even know what it meant. From the look of her, it didn't seem like she would know what it meant. But there was some opening, a commonality that could be taken advantage of to preach Krishna consciousness. So we have to look for those kind of opportunities as well, and make ourselves available for that kind of opportunity. That's one reason why we wear the dress. We're in public, we wear the dress, and so people can, you're some religious persons. People, they understand that. And then if they're looking, if they have some need, then they'll seek out a religious person to try to get some help with their situation. And maybe you have that experience. People come up to you and they sort of tell you their troubles sometimes. Oh, I'm having this trouble. Why? Because they think, here's a spiritual person, someone that can give me some answers that I'm looking for. So we have to be aware of these opportunities that Krishna and Srila Prabhupada are giving us. And so there are some guidelines or some encouragement we get from the verse and purport here today. There are 5 things in this purport about preaching or sharing Krishna consciousness. Now, I should just ask, what you do here. A lot of places, and particularly I know Bhakti Marg Swami in Canada, he doesn't like the word preaching. He feels it's a little condescending and it's kind of outmoded in interacting with people. So sometimes talk about sharing Krishna consciousness or use other language which is, again, not going to turn someone away from the opportunity to hear about Krishna consciousness. So I like to use sharing Krishna consciousness, so I'll use that today. Although preaching doesn't necessarily have to have that connotation, but I think a lot of Christian preachers, they give it a bad name, the term preaching. But there are 5 points in this purport where Prabhupada talks about what someone who shares Krishna consciousness with others accomplishes in their life. The first is that preaching or sharing Krishna consciousness is pleasing to Krishna. Why would it be pleasing to Krishna? Can anyone say? Yes, Prabhu. Yeah, he wants the conditioned souls to come back to him. That's the purpose of this whole material creation. This world is created specifically to give the sleeping, dormant, living entities a chance to revive their original relationship with him. That's the purpose of the creation. Now, of course, creating the world like this is not a burden for Krishna. But just think to the extent that this world is created with all its intricacies and complications and everything. I mean, in one sense, it is, it's a big deal, this whole world, how it all works and everything, and it's all organized. And so what's the purpose of all that organization and development? What's the purpose of that? It's simply to give the living entity a chance to revive his original Krishna consciousness. And so if we do something that's in line with that, obviously we're going to be pleasing Krishna, who's the origin of all that. We're making the best use of what his design is to try to wake up the living entities. So it's pleasing to Krishna. So that's one reason why we should engage in this activity, because it's pleasing to Krishna. And of course we know that that's our purpose as well, to please Krishna. So, pleasing to Krishna. But that's not all. And the purport, it describes here that this is the best service to humanity. The best. We may want to do good for a loved one, our family members, our nation, but generally speaking, we have limited conceptions of doing good for others based on our own limitations. I mean, what can we do? This is one way we can appreciate Srila Prabhupada. He didn't have that limited type of conceptions about helping others. He wanted to help the whole world, therefore he went to great personal sacrifice to come to America and found ISKCON 50 years ago. It's such a, there's one devotee, I think her name is Yamini Dasi. She wrote a song about Prabhupada coming on the Jaladuta. And the Gurukula children in Lachua at Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja last year, they came and they sang that song. And the song, she has a refrain in there that says that she prays to the Atlantic, to deliver Prabhupada safely to the shores of North America so that he can give what he came to give. And so it's quite moving song. The Gurukul kids' presentation of it was quite moving for me. Prabhupada is literally our savior. Again, that's a little bit of maybe a Christian background that I have, but we're talking about the savior, that's big in Christianity. And we have a savior. I mean, Prabhupada came all the way from India, crossing the ocean, 2 heart attacks, all kinds of personal difficulty, struggling alone in New York City for months before anything happened. But he came as our savior. He did all that just to save us and save the entire humanity. So again, we may have limited conceptions of trying to do good for others. But this activity of spreading Krishna consciousness is actually the best service to humanity at large, even if people don't appreciate it. Even if people don't appreciate it, it's the best service to humanity at large. Why? Is this just sentiment that I'm saying here? Why is it the best service to humanity at large? It awakens our natural love for Krishna, and our natural love, it's natural. That's our being, is to have a relationship with Krishna. That's who we are. Jivera Swarupoy Krishnera Nityadas. Nityadas, not that it changes. We're conditioned in this material world, and somehow or another we're not Nityadas. We still are. We're just an illusion about it. And so the best service to anyone is to wake them up, especially if they're headed for danger. Especially if they're headed for danger. And this material world is full of danger at every step. Padam padam, jet vipadam. Danger at every step is there. So it's the best service to humanity that you can do to try to give people Krishna consciousness. Now, how should it be done? Prabhupada makes the point a couple of times in his purport. It should be done without discrimination. Without discrimination. That means it's for everyone. And it's beneficial for everyone at every time, in every place, in every circumstance. At Bhaktivedanta College in Radhadesh, Belgium, I teach a course in ethics, Introduction to Ethics, and it focuses on mainly Western philosophers. And the whole pursuit in Western philosophy of ethics is to come up with a universal understanding of what's right and what's wrong. And universal means in every time, in every place, in every circumstance. So that's the endeavor of these big, big philosophers. But I can tell you that by studying their philosophies, not one of them has come up with a truly universal conception of what's right and wrong, what's good or bad, that can be applied to every person at every time and in every place. They're just not successful in that endeavor. There's always some discrimination that has to be made. But spreading Krishna consciousness, sharing Krishna consciousness with others should be done without discrimination. It can be given to everyone. And if we do that, if we approach it like that, then we become very, very blissful. Prabhupada built a house that the whole world could live in. And so, spreading Krishna consciousness should be like that. Everyone, at any time, in any place. Now, what is to be understood about Krishna? What is the good tidings that we bring to all those that we spread Krishna consciousness to? That's also mentioned in the verse here by Prabhupada, quoting from Bhagavad Gita. Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatvam mam shantim richati. There are 3 things about Krishna that should be very well received by anybody we attempt to give Krishna consciousness. It's actually a relief to understand these 3 things. That's the real gift we give them. We give them Krishna consciousness. We give them 3 solid reasons why their life should change. Bhoktaram jagatapasam. He's the proprietor. No. He is the enjoyer, supreme enjoyer. He's the supreme enjoyer. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. But Krishna is not the kind of enjoyer that just enjoys for himself and he doesn't care about anyone else. Being the supreme enjoyer means that he's also interested in giving you as much enjoyment, more enjoyment than he has for himself. He's anxious to give that to others. Such a person, most people, Western conceptions, Western religions have a very fearful nature of God. God is the punisher. That's probably what that guy at the beach was thinking. Oh, God, I'm not interested in, getting punished. So let me get out of here before I, start to feel that way. But that's not what we're giving people when we give them Krishna consciousness. We're giving them the supreme enjoyer. Krishna playing with his cowherd boyfriends. Krishna being loved and nourished by his mother Yashoda. Krishna, the lover of the gopis. Such a conception of God should be very welcomed by the conditioned living entities. Second point, he's the proprietor of everything. Everything belongs to him. But again, he's not selfish. He's generous. Everything belongs to him. Therefore, he can give everything to you. And he will give everything to you. Whatever problems you have, no problem. He can take care of it. Because of the third, and that is, he's the best well-wishing friend of everyone. That's the good tidings we have when we go and spread Krishna consciousness to others. We give them that. And finally, the last point in the purport is that this is real friendship. This is real friendship. When we interact with people and give them Krishna consciousness like that, we can give them real friendship, and that means that we can be satisfied. Everyone's looking for some satisfactory relationship in life, because ultimately we're persons, and ultimately we have that personal relationship with Krishna, who's the supreme person. So everyone's looking for that, and we look for it in terms of friendship. Real friendship is there when we interact with other living entities who are suffering in this world to give them Krishna consciousness. So these are 5 things that the purport talks about are the benefits in the process of sharing Krishna consciousness with others. Now, I have another list here of what preaching is, that again, as I said, is based a little bit on my own realizations of trying to engage in this process. But a lot of them are based on the example that we see in Srila Prabhupada's life and in his preaching. First is that sharing Krishna consciousness is an individual endeavor. All of us as individuals have our own particular way of being effective in spreading Krishna consciousness. And my experience is that individuality, which is real, it's based on our own realization, our particular style of interacting with others. That individuality is the real potency that one has when one goes and tries to give Krishna consciousness to others. And so although we have major types of preaching endeavors where we all participate, Harinam Sankirtan, book distribution, festivals, where we all come together for a particular type of program, that doesn't mean that we should forget about our individuality and our own strengths that we can bring to sharing Krishna consciousness with other people. It's very important, and it's real. I may have, or you may have, a certain level of realization. If I try to imitate your level of realization in my sharing Krishna consciousness with others, is that going to be effective, or is it going to come off a little hollow, a little preachy? That's probably going to be there if we try to preach beyond our realization. We're much stronger and much more effective preaching our realization, what we have understood about Krishna consciousness, what's in our heart, and giving that to someone rather than try to think that I can give realization beyond what I actually have. It comes off as artificial. So a particular style we may have, and since we're here in the Shadla Yatra, I can say, and I think Harivilas Prabhu, hopefully he'll remember, that over the years I always would say to him that I was quite impressed by things that he would do, which are like individual style. I mean, the one thing that I always liked was the public speaking thing that was on the web, and there was a microphone, like a picture of a microphone on the website right there. Public, so like immediately, you step up to the mic, and I think that that kind of individual style of things, that flair that we all have as individuals, makes us enthusiastic, and it's also connects with people, in a real way. So I think that our individual style and a level of realization, time, place, and circumstance is also very important. I was hearing from Namrata this morning about how Krishna has arranged a bus stop right out in front of the temple so that people can come, to the temple in the morning, go to Mangalarti chant, and then they just have the bus to go to work right there. It's right in front of the temple. I mean, take advantage of these arrangements by Krishna. The example in this case is when Prabhupada was traveling in India with the devotees' first tour. Shyamasundar and Malati were with him, and they had a little daughter named Saraswati. And Prabhupada would point out how Saraswati, who was only 2 or 3 years old, how she was a preacher of Krishna consciousness. And he would say that, repeating what she said, little girl would go up to people and say, "Do you know who is Krishna? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead." And naturally the people would be charmed by a little girl, Western girl coming up and saying like that. But Prabhupada pointed out this is how we should preach according to our realization. And it's effective. She was an effective preacher, even though she was only 2 or 3 years old. So sharing Krishna consciousness is also an act of love. And it should be done with that. I mean, we should actually care about and express some love for those people that we're trying to give Krishna consciousness. And if we do that, it'll be effective. Again, people can appreciate when they're being talked at or they're being engaged in friendly, loving conversation. And so, better that we have a heartfelt compassion for people. We put some love in it. The process of bhakti yoga, it's devotion. It's saturated with loving sentiments for Krishna and for all living beings. Prahlad Maharaj here is in a verse he's saying, show mercy to all living entities by enlightening them in devotional service and thus becoming their well-wishers. So the language is to give up your demonic nature where we don't care about people and there's no expressions of love between one another. Give that up, he says, and act without an enmity or duality. But then more positively in terms of emotions, show mercy to all living entities by enlightening them in devotional service. Show mercy, show you love them, show you care for them. That's a very, very important part of sharing Krishna consciousness with others. And the example here is going back to ISKCON on 26 2nd Avenue, the first initiation. Satsrupa Maharaj, who was coming to the storefront there, and one of the first devotees coming, when they had the first initiation, somehow or another, he didn't turn up, he didn't come. He was doing service for Prabhupada, he was doing typing of his manuscripts. So first initiation rolled around, and they had the initiation, but he wasn't there, he didn't come. Next day he came to Prabhupada's room, and he was delivering the work he was doing for him, the manuscripts he had typed. And so Prabhupada said to him, "You didn't come yesterday. Why you didn't come for the initiation?" And Satsrupa Maharaj didn't say anything. But then Prabhupada said to him, "This process is not mechanical. If you love me, I'll love you." And so love is meant to be part of it. I'd love to have Prabhupada say that to me. Wow, if you love me, I'll love you. But he's saying that actually to all of us. We shouldn't think he's not. That opportunity is there for all of us. If we put love and feeling in our service, then we'll also get reciprocation from Krishna. So sharing Krishna consciousness is an act of love. Sharing Krishna consciousness is best when it's not forced. If we have to force people, then we're not going to get the best results. And sometimes that kind of force is there. There's a famous letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to a woman named Lynn Ludwig. She had met some devotees in a parking lot, brahmacharis, and her experience was, and she wrote to Prabhupada complaining about it, that her experience was that they were had a negative attitude, about life and everything. You can imagine new brahmachari out in Sankirtan, maybe protecting themselves from their own attachment to the material world and being very harsh or curt with people and trying to force Krishna consciousness on people, maybe. At least that's what it seems that she complained to Prabhupada about. And Prabhupada wrote her back a very considerate letter. It was about 3 or 4 pages long. And he explained in there something that's concluded by the final sentence he wrote. He said, "Please forgive them if they have made some fault or they displayed some behavior that's not so good, because they've given their life to Krishna, and that is never a mistake." Prabhupada said, they've given their life to Krishna, and that's never a mistake. So maybe use of force is not the best way to share Krishna consciousness with others, but even if we do, still our activity can't be faulted, but maybe it can be done a little bit better, and we should always be trying to do it better, trying to improve. And so my experience is that sharing Krishna consciousness with others is best when it's not forced. Prabhupada said that if they go away from our interaction with them with a bad experience, then that's our fault, not the fault of Krishna consciousness. We have to become more expert. Also, sharing Krishna consciousness is best when it's inclusive. We should try to include people in what we're doing. I mean, that's the purpose of our festivals and things like that, to be inclusive, to give people an opportunity to to take to Krishna consciousness. People from all kinds of backgrounds. Therefore we go to public places where we'll find people from all kinds of backgrounds and trying to give them Krishna consciousness. Because ultimately, every living being is part and parcel of Krishna. Not just from this community or that community, this race or that race, this social class or that social class, but Krishna consciousness is for everybody. And so we have to be intelligent enough how to make it inclusive. How to make it inclusive so that everyone feels comfortable. That's the example of bridge preaching or something like that. To give people an entrance into Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is best when it's relevant to the world around us. If people don't feel that what we have to offer, if they're not advanced enough, let's say, in Krishna consciousness to understand that chanting Hare Krishna is the best thing that you can do with your human life, if it's not relative to them, then they're not likely to take it as seriously as they should. So, best when Krishna consciousness, we're my God, Chaitanya, what a surprise. Krishna consciousness is best when it is responsive to the world situation. And therefore it becomes practical for people. Yes, these people have a solution to the world around us. They're not just crazy fellows, but they have something to add to the dialogue that's going around in the world. One of Prabhupada's disciples was speaking to me one time, and he was saying how in the 70s, he joined in the early 70s, maybe the late 60s, he was saying how Krishna consciousness was so revolutionary in those days. It resonated so much with the youth that they felt, oh, here's a way something that addresses all the problems, all the wrongs that are there in society. It was very relevant, and so therefore people sacrificed their lives and took to it. So we have to make Krishna consciousness like that and make it relevant to the world, responsive to the world around us, so that people take it as something that's real. And of course, sharing Krishna consciousness is best when the people's interest we're working with is put in front of our own interest. If we go and think, well, I'm going to be number one book distributor, and that's the purpose, that's what's driving me to go out and spread Krishna consciousness, then we're putting our own interest ahead of those that we're actually trying to give Krishna consciousness to. It should be the other way around. The interest of the person that's new to Krishna consciousness, or the interest even of a devotee who may be going through difficulty and we're trying to help, their interest should be put in front of ours. And if we do that, then we're going to be effective. Just a couple more quickly. Creativity is very attractive, so we should be as creative as possible in individual interactions with others, as well as in organizations, activities, interactions with others. I think Bhakti True Swami later this morning is going to be doing a seminar, the value of the institution in spreading Krishna consciousness. That institution should be creative and dynamic, and that's one thing that I've been quite impressed with in my first visit here. It's not a dynamism in a temple of people coming and this is happening, that's happening, and it creates an attractive atmosphere if you go and people are coming and going. I was chanting out in the parking lot out there yesterday, and cars are turning in and turning out. Somebody that was walking by or driving by, oh, there's a lot happening in that place. I see a lot of cars there and people coming and going. It has some attractive. Oh, what is this? Let me see what's going on here. So creativity drives interest, and so we should try to be creative as possible. Also, non-judgmental. We shouldn't preach with a judgmental attitude. You're going to hell and I'm going to save you. But what I can do to help. So these are some things that I've found over the years are in line with the kind of position that this purport talks about. Purport talks about a very exalted position that we all have the opportunity to be in. Prahlad Maharaj was telling his demonic schoolmates, I mean, we're not demonic, we're trying to be devotees, and so what kind of advice are we getting? If he's giving this to his demonic schoolmates, give up that nature and take this well-wishing attitude towards all living entities, then we should also sort of try to embrace that approach. And so these are some thoughts I've had on that. Some comments, Harvey Vilas, will you have something you can add? Or?
First of all, thank you for
there seems to be always a argument about, in ISKCON, about what is actual valid bridge preaching and what has gone beyond the pale of let's say, appropriateness and connecting with the public. And especially when you start talking about creativity, sometimes people become a little too zealous in their creativity, and it's often interpreted as being inappropriate type of way of spreading Krishna consciousness. What would you have to say about that?
Well, I think I think we need to be a little more tolerant or accepting, or not first thing doubting as opposed to first thing trusting. In a society of devotees, first thing trusting is what I think Prabhupada wanted us to do, and he talked about things like love and trust. So first thing trusting, but if we have this attitude, first thing trusting, that also opens up the relationship where we can inquire. If it's first thing doubting and then we try to inquire, it becomes an inquisition, isn't it? And who wants to go through an inquisition? It breaks up. But if the first thing is trusting, then inquiry becomes a method of understanding rather than a method of discriminating against. So I think that's the first thing. And I think that individuality is also something that is a struggle, and therefore I want to attend what Bhakti True Maharaj is going to be talking later this morning, because there's always this duality, we see a duality, institution versus individuality. If you look at Gaudiya history, individuality sort of has won out over institutions. But I think Prabhupada wanted a balance in those things. And so if we give people the opportunity to be themselves and be individually creative, yet have a relationship when we can draw back or influence them if, it goes a little bit this way or that way, then I think we're in a better ground than if we squash all kinds of creativity altogether just out of fear. That's my own personal view. Any other questions or comments on this? Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, I was formulating the question when you were mentioning the topic about forcing Krishna consciousness over the society. So still later on you gave the answers, so many answers about this particular question I was making. Still I'm going to make it. We see in history that those religious processes that force upon people, they grow very fast. So if we don't follow this process of forcing people, how are we going to grow?
Well, I think we grow stronger. That's one thing, how we're going to grow. I think it's going to be a stronger growth, although it may be a slower growth. But there's a saying, English saying, a man forced against his will is of the same opinion still. And so people may be forced, but that doesn't mean there's some change of heart. I think better go for a change of heart and have strong, dedicated individuals, a smaller force, that is, so to speak, than a larger force where people are forced, and then when a bigger force comes along, then they change or they give up. So I think that Prabhupada, I think he also indicated that in different ways. He said at one point, no more temples, we have enough temples. I think he even said no more devotees, we have enough devotees. He also talked about boiling the milk, working with a refined group of people as opposed to untrained masses. So both are there. We have methods to spread Krishna consciousness to the masses. We have processes to spread Krishna consciousness to those who are very personally devoted and surrendered to the process. So how to do both? I think that there is benefits on both sides, but forcing to the point where people can't make an informed choice about Krishna consciousness tends to be a more temporary kind of acceptance than we're interested in. Does that answer the question? Anybody else have something they could say? Okay. I think better a dedicated than a forced group. Numbers can't. Small number of dedicated people can accomplish more than large numbers of artificially convinced people. History has shown that, particularly in terms of wars and battles, where small numbers of dedicated people can defeat larger numbers based on their conviction. So, anything else? Glories to Srila Prabhupada.